Hi everyone, it's State Senator Lydia Edwards, and I just wanted to reach out and give you some updates on some of the events I'm having this summer, and also let you know what we're working on in the State House as we're coming to the end of the session. There's a lot of bills, and also give you a couple announcements. So actually, starting off with the announcements, I wanted to let you know that Sumner Tunnel will be closing again this year. However, this year, it'll only be closing for 4 weeks from July 5th to August 5th. As you'll remember, last year, it closed for a full 2 months, a little more, and it was a learning curve. Again, we're still fighting for the same mitigation, a free blue line, making sure that we have emergency plans, also making sure that we are providing other forms of transportation throughout the district to clear out our roads. It is going to be, again, frustrating, and we will have some weekend closures after it, but we've cut the time in half, at least for the closure, so very happy about that. The other announcement I'd like to make is I'll take my Senate hat off and put on my first lieutenant hat. As you know, I'm in the Army National Guard, and I am a JAG officer, and I will be hosting a Memorial Day brunch at the VFW POST in Beachmont. And it's an open brunch to our military service members, to our reservists, to our Gold Star families, and of course the family members of those members and of the military service members and veterans. This is a Memorial Day brunch, so not to be confused with Veteran Day. This is really in honor of those from especially our district who didn't come home or who we lost and who served our country. And so we are very excited for this brunch. I would love for you to come. It's the first 200 people who RSVP, so space is limited, and you can RSVP at Memorial Day 2024, all one word, at gmail.com. Memorial Day 2024 at gmail.com. And or you can call my office at 617-722-1634. I want to thank in advance the junior ROTC from both Revere and East Boston who will be coming to volunteer and serve and register people at the event. We will have babysitting because, hey, my mom was a single mom in the military, and oftentimes we forgot to make spaces available for kids as well. So you'll need, when you RSVP, let us know if you'll need that. Also, when you RSVP, let us know if there's someone who we're doing this in memory of. POW table will also be present. But it's going to be a good time. We're going to have food, dancing, music, a cash bar, and honor those who served our country. That being said, in terms of the service and work that I'm doing, putting my Senate hat back on, there are a lot of bills and a lot of hard work we're doing right now. I want to talk a little bit about one major bill that I've been working on for several years. And it's part of the same work that I've been doing as an advocate, and that's for workers' rights. You see, I firmly believe people should be paid the minimum wage, have overtime protections, be able to form a union, and be able to have unemployment benefits and sick and family medical leave. And right now, my bill would extend all of those rights and assure that they are forever provided to drivers of Uber and Lyft or Instacart and DoorDash. My bill, Senate 627, is basically assuring that they are treated like every other employee in the Commonwealth. And I know a lot of pushback has come, especially from the corporations, saying, oh, they're special and that the drivers are independent contractors. I do disagree with that narrative. And I also think that if we treat them as independent contractors, a lot of those protections I just announced will not be happening. It comes down to the bottom line of the companies. And in a recent auditor's report from Auditor DeZoglio noted that by labeling them independent contractors, the companies have not paid one dime into our social programs. For example, in 2023, the companies made over $1 billion in Massachusetts. And they paid a big goose egg into unemployment, workers' comp, and also paid family medical leave. But you know who did pay into those? every other small business, hardworking business that has 1 or 2 people working for them, they pay it on a quarterly basis, out the nose in some cases, to those programs. But it's not just that we want to make sure that the Uber and Lyfts of the world pay their fair share. We also want to make sure that the drivers and the consumers are protected. My bill is looking at a comprehensive regulation of this gig economy that is growing so incredibly fast. Regulations such as making sure they can't price gouge us. I'm sure some of you remember or have had the incident where you're ordering one of an Uber or Lyft, and then 2 seconds later, you try to get it again, and the price is doubled, maybe tripled. Maybe during the time that the summer tunnel was closed, you saw wild swings in the prices. See, that's because they're not regulated. I believe they shouldn't be able to price gouge us. I also want to make sure the drivers and the consumers are safe by having a panic button, just in case, a lot of the drivers are women and they're picking up drunk people at night. I want them to be able to call and be protected. And a lot of the consumers are men and women who need to make sure that they are not taken advantage of by the drivers. Essentially, I want Uber and Lyft to stay, but I want them to play by the same rules that every other business does in the Commonwealth. Remember, they chose to come here, and all of these laws that I have, this law that I'm proposing, is of Massachusetts law that's existed before Uber and Lyft got here. So all we're asking is that they play the same playing ground as everybody else. The other bill or conversation you may have heard a lot about is the MBTA 3A laws. This is less impactful, I would say, in Revere, because Revere is already moving and planning and is already, I believe, close to being considered compliant without doing anything extra. By that I mean the way Revere is growing and how it's growing around the T's and the MBTA, or public transportation, is part of a lot of the vision of that law already. But just to give, I know some of you have heard about it, just to give you a little bit of a context and understanding, this law was passed in 2021, and 171 cities and towns have to comply with it. These cities and towns were picked because of their proximity to public transportation. And the assumption or the goal is to make sure that they plan for at least one district in their city and town for multifamily housing. And again, Revere is already compliant on that component. And the goal is to make sure that we are planning for a future for a population that is growing. It is about economic growth. It's about attracting new residents, but also keeping the folks here that we need to stay. A lot of our kids who are graduating from college, who are young professionals, they would love to come and live in Revere, or live in Winthrop, or live in the town in East Boston. But one, they can't afford it, and two, there aren't enough units for them to choose from. Now, this does not mean that by having MBTA laws, we're having affordable housing. One is about planning. Affordable housing is about policy. And Revere needs to take on that policy and have that conversation on its own. How do you want to have affordable housing in Revere? And that's passed at the local level. And I really do hope that Revere does get there and pass that kind of legislation at the local level. That being said, it is a controversial, I know, policy throughout the state, but the overwhelming majority of the cities and towns are passing plans and getting them approved. For example, right now, of the 177 cities and towns, 44 have passed at their local level, at their town council, a plan. And now their next step is to move it on to get approved by the secretary. Already 25 of those plans are pending, so the other ones are coming along and people are voting regularly. And then I would say 3 cities and towns are already deemed compliant as we're moving it along. So the vast majority of cities and towns want to present their plans or present what they're already doing, be deemed compliant, and keep moving. And so I'm really excited, hopefully, that that happens throughout my entire district. That what we're doing already is recognized as the good work, and we keep moving. Housing bond bill is another huge piece of legislation I'm helping to steward through the State House. It seeks to increase the amount of money available for affordable housing and also reduces a lot of the barriers to production and preservation of housing. Further, it gives communities the tools to develop more housing where they specifically need it. So with bond funding and also straight cash funding, a lot of these cities and towns that are being told to plan are going to turn right back to the state and say, with what money? And that's what the response of this bond bill is. We include $150 million, for example, for first-time homeowners. We include $4 billion or $1.3 billion of the bond bill is for our public housing stock and retrofitting it and making it truly dignified, sustainable housing, bringing a lot of the units that are not dignified back on to the system so that people can get into that affordable housing, but also making sure that our portfolio as a state is truly dignified, safe, green for everyone to last for generations. There's going to be funds going into sustainable and green housing initiatives, as well as also, as I mentioned, paying for the retrofitting of our public housing stocks. The goal is to make sure that we are kickstarting an economy of housing that throughout the state. There are a lot of cities and towns that I went to, from Fitchburg to Chester, that are hungry for and excited to build. And we want to be able to support them, especially if they're building around the commuter rail stop. So, very excited. Before we get on to the next topic, I just wanted to also note that there's some policies in the housing bond bill. Some major ones that you may have heard of include the transfer fee, which is a fee that would be assessed on luxury units. If they're when they're bought and sold one time, that fee would be assessed. And that would go to a local cities and towns housing trust. Cities and towns have to opt in. If this is passed, it would be an opt-in law, so cities and towns have to opt into it if they want to have a transfer fee. Another piece of legislation within the bond bill is eviction ceiling, something near and dear to my heart. And truly, I believe that people who've been evicted need to have a second chance. Our state currently allows people who have been convicted to, after they've served their time and their probation, to go in front of a court and ask that their felonies or their misdemeanors be sealed. And there's certain amounts of times that they have to wait before they even do that. They can make their case for a new life, for a fresh start. I think that that's the right thing to do. And I just want to have the same available fresh start and the ability to make your case to the court when it comes to an eviction. So that's what that legislation does. After a certain amount of time after your eviction, being able to say, hey, I was going through a recession, going through a divorce, going through whatever that caused me not to pay. Some people have been evicted for addiction issues. They've been evicted for all sorts of things. But at some point, they're not who they were in the past. And I would like the ability and a pathway for people to be able to say that. And before I go on to the final or the next section, there's the last component that I'd like to highlight that's part of the bond bill, and that is the YIMBY component, which would lower the threshold for affordable housing policies in cities and towns from a supermajority to a simple majority, if passed. Which would again help and allow for cities and towns to overcome any local barriers or opposition to affordable housing. And again, there's also an ADU component for single family homes as well. The goal is to try and assure that people are housed, able to own if they want to own, be able to rent where they want to rent, and to have the dignity of choice throughout the entire Commonwealth. On to the water, Ferry Updates. So with regards to the water, again, I was able to secure some funding for Winthrop and for East Boston in terms of the ferries, and being able to pool resources to hopefully one day design in a comprehensive ferry system. And in talking about that, someone brought up Revere and said, well, what about us? And how can we have access to the ferry? So I want you to know I was I'm starting conversations with what that would look like if the water is of enough depth for a ferry to pick up on Revere Beach side, or if there's an inlet on a river side that allows for us to do some form of water transportation. But if we can't, we are certainly still committed to making sure that we bring in that commuter rail stop by Wonderland. As many of you know, we're doing our best to make sure that there's a commuter rail stop that extends from Lynn all the way to Revere and adds one last section where people can get off the commuter rail and walk over to the Blue Line through a little bridge or sky bridge that we're going to do, and then head straight to downtown Boston. Now that's going to help us get cars off the road. It's also going to assure that we are able to, I think essentially it's cheaper than probably extending the Blue Line into Lynn. But it's really important that we set that up. And again, with the amount of people coming through, we don't want them to just literally come through Revere. We want to make sure that they stay and maybe have dinner and shop around. So we're doing our best to make sure that the growth of transportation infrastructure isn't just so that Revere is a pass-through, and so that people have access to all that Revere has to offer. One last note on transportation, the pilot program for low-income fares is happening, and it's extended to M passes, and it's also going to assure that people of 3 or 4 times the federal poverty rate will get a half off on our commuter rail prices, on our T passes, and of course on the M passes. Why is this important? Based on a study, a lot of people are giving up their first entire paycheck just to go to work, to pay for the commuter rail, to pay to commute to work. And a lot of those low-wage workers use the transportation system the most. So that's a disconnect and a disincentive. We want to make sure that people can afford to get to work. I think, there's been several, I'm sure you've seen in the news around the district about this substation in East Boston. Yesterday was the final SJC court argument to discuss all of the different components of the substation. I have stood in opposition to it. I still stand in opposition to it. I don't believe it's of true need. And I also think that the community process to lead up to that substation is severely lacking. So I will be able to give you more updates on this as soon as I find out, or as soon as we all find out, probably next month, what the decision is from the SJC. But I want to thank the East Boston activists. I want to thank the environmentalists. I want to thank so many people from throughout the district, Winthrop as well as Revere, who stood up with their East Boston neighbors to oppose the substation. And I think I have maybe one more topic to discuss. I know, and I appreciate your patience. So in terms of my final topic, I want to let you know the budget's coming up. So I'll be deep into those amendments and supporting both Jess and Jeff as we're doing our best to make sure that Revere gets the resources it needs to keep shining as an incredible, fast-growing city. But we want it always to be a city for people, regardless of their income, to feel that they can make a home here, that their kids can be educated and have an incredible education experience here, where you feel safe here. So public safety, education, and the ability to buy a home are top of mind for myself, Representative Jess Giannino, and Representative Jeff Turco. So we're going to keep fighting for Revere as our budget continues to go through the process. And feel free to write my office or call me if you have any questions or suggestions. Thank you for listening. I know it's been a long time in terms of my little talk here. But I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.